Good morning, everyone. If you're joining, we're just going to give a couple more minutes before starting. Yeah, a few more people coming into the room now. And give it another minute or so. Just a few more people joining. Right, I will get going. Good morning, everybody. So my name is John Jackson. I'm the UK, Benelux and Scandinavia sales manager with Avaya, and I'll be delivering today's webinar. So just to let everybody know that the session will be recorded, and we want to do this for kind of future reference, and also for the participants who couldn't join this morning. So we'll start recording, and the recording will be available like on our website on the download page, which we'll share after this session as well. We value your participation, so feel free to ask questions. So you'll see on your screen a Q&A button, so feel free to post a question in there, and we'll review that at the end. Or there will be like 10 minutes where there'll be an option to, if you want to switch your camera on or to go onto audio and ask a live question at the end as well. Okay, so let's get started. I really hope you enjoy the webinar, the content today, and very much appreciate taking time out to join us for the webinar. And we'll get going. Okay, there's a few more people rolling in. The intention today is to provide information on the intricacies of current lift alarm technology. What we're really trying to do is, us as a manufacturer, and I guess for every user of a lift, is provide the maximum occupant safety for all users and all passengers. So in line with that, making sure that the most optimum regulatory compliance is achieved, and then really thinking about elevator phone technology across the operating life in terms of like how reliable that asset is, and also the future proofing angle of the assets as well, and like a future maintainers perspective. Okay, so in terms of agenda, we'll go across these several topics, which is number one, landlines no longer fit for purpose. Number two, the paradigm shift. I'm going to talk in detail about this move across to cellular IoT GSM technology. Really then discussing the application itself. So are all gateways equal? And then delving into areas like security considerations as well. As more and more technology moves across to IoT, this topic is becoming hotter and hotter. Then driving through in terms of future reliability of alarm calls, and I think as we move towards cellular, then the technology is at the mercy of this kind of like technology basically. So we need to make sure that as the landscape changes, that the reliability of the whole lift estate is not affected. And then we'll talk about the visualization of compliance and alarm availability, notifications, from the EN81-28 perspective and overall like health and statuses of the devices themselves. So why are landlines no longer fit for purpose on lift applications? Basically, I'm sure most people are aware of this now, but the huge nationwide update of the copper infrastructure to fiber-based digital technology as the need for better bandwidth and more faster communications, then this is really accelerated now. So everybody, I'm sure you've seen the OpenReach drive to update and convert the whole country across by the end of 2025. So really, we're moving up to like the peak of this really now, and like the drive and is really accelerating. The whole move to fiber optic, it means the end of analog support for the PSTN network. So what does that mean in terms of lift lines? It means that the 48-volt power that actually basically powers and supports and backs up the device is being removed, and also the reduction of support for analog signaling with the communication providers as well, which is bringing through challenges as well as the things like DTMF technology in the background is used. Then this throws up challenges, technical challenges that need to be overcome. Basically, the big, huge challenge is that any mains power failure would lead to the fiber telephone lines failing. And like from the LEA information, we estimate that around about 257,000 lift alarms in the UK are connected to landlines, and there's a shift obviously underway to cellular at the moment. But like there's obviously a huge amount to go in this transition. Fiber now serves 8.5 million lines in the UK and actually going to 16 million premises. So you'll hear this term like FTTP, fiber to the premises, and that's one of OpenReach's key KPIs. Removing something in the order of like 70 to 80,000 analog lines each week, and they're actually OpenReach have published that they are above their own targets for 2025. There was talk probably 6 months ago that this would roll into 2026, but it's looking like that they're keeping a very strong pace and actually ahead of many of their indicators. So analog lines are no longer available for any new developments in the UK. The stop sell program, i.e. Stealth copper migration is well underway, and like basically when an exchange reaches 75% fiber, no new analog services can be commissioned. Towards the end of last year, the UK fully moved into a nationwide stop sell. So we have an infographic actually, which we kind of, basically the source data is OpenReach, and it shows basically by postcode where the exchanges are being turned off and like how is the digital switch happening in that particular area. So you can see the graphic of the UK, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and like the extent of this, and in particular around like large city conurbations where it's really accelerating. So if you did want to check a particular like client's postcode area, you can go into this on a link that we'll share on our website, and you can look at particular towns, cities, and find out exactly what the status is. But you can see there's lots of red on there, and I think that's, well, basically that will accelerate more aggressively into 2024. But really, like the paradigm shift to cellular technology or GSM technology is really underway now. Cellular alarms have actually been a trusted method in the UK for greater than 10 years. So Memco, Avaya have sold them for that amount of time, and the technology actually has been used extensively on a longer time frame in areas like Iberia, and that region is already the most dominant basically lift phone engagement technology. So like they really were ahead of the game in terms of this, and many countries actually have already made the switch across. So overall, it's estimated that around 29 to 33% of the lifts today are working on a GSM. So that might be a 2G system, a 3G system, or a 4G system. LIA, the UK Lift and Escalator Association, recommend that cellular GSM as the solution for lift phones to address the digital switch issues. And like as I spoke before, the digital switch to cellular has already been completed, and like Avaya as a business have already gone through this transition in territories that we serve with our products, like for example Australia. So like what our message really is, like the accelerated and well-planned adoption is required over the next 2 years to ensure like the highest occupant safety across the UK install base. One of the challenges with Australia, for example, that we saw was that a lot of building owners still left it to the last minute, didn't sign off on the investment, and then there was a real resource shortage. So like well-planned staged adoption is definitely a high recommendation to plan this work with obviously a limited capacity in the industry of qualified engineers. We're moving on to talk about gateways now, and I want to to drill into like several areas of which like the application considerations would be talked about. And our start point here is EN81-28 Part 4. So this is the really critical area around safety requirements, risk reduction measures around the emergency electrical power supply. So I'll pull out a few statements from the standards themselves. So the first statement is that any alarm shall not be impeded or lost even in the cases of electrical power supply failure. So basically, it must have a backup power solution for the alarm system. Also, when this the power is lost, for example, and the backup supply is engaged, there must be ability to inform the maintenance providers, and then basically that system should have 1 hour of function for the whole alarm system and provide at least 15 minutes worth of voice communication. So any overall system and any device or connected device should adhere to that level of backup to support any trapped passenger. And then the standards were written like obviously quite a few years ago when GSM adoption was low, but it does still call out that if the transmitter itself is integrated into the alarm system, i.e. the GSM module, the requirements of the standard also apply to the transmitter. So yeah, below anything like that, then the lift maintainer must be informed, and there'd be obviously a deviation from the standard if part of the system does not apply and adhere to the EN81-28. So when moving across to cellular as well, it's really critical that the network flexibility and reliability is thought about for the cellular system. So the first the topic here is like what's called VoLTE support. So as it stands today, pretty much all lift phone voice calls are using the 2G channel. But as we know that there'll be this 2G channel will eventually get a sunset. We'll talk about that later in the webinar. But yeah, I think having a future-proof option that would enable a voice communication is really key here. So VoLTE would be that. So it's voice over LTE on the 4G channel. So that's really key, having VoLTE support as well as the 4G and 2G. Also things like simultaneous voice and data. So for example, if you have a gateway that's pulling lots of data alarm points, then that can affect the ability for the voice channel to operate. Obviously, voice channel takes priority, but if you have simultaneous voice and data, then it overcomes that. And then we're seeing a shift in many European countries, in particular France, have gone heavy onto voice over IP technology. I think in the UK we're seeing more like overall acceptance of VoLTE, but like in terms of being future ready, and if for the ability to initiate a data-only call, and this might be more valuable where there's a larger estate of lifts, for example, talking to a call center. So you do need an end-to-end solution with VoIP, but obviously it offers something different in terms of like the digital telecoms technology. Ease of installation, obviously time on site is in essence cost and money. So any areas where this can be optimized is really key. So easy remote configuration set up by things like mobile apps, SMS, and then cloud connectivity to set the device up, and can save time and help, especially when there's large deployments underway. Things like signal strength, having a signal strength tester on board the device, configuration wizards that enable like that simplified complexity, and then the cloud connectivity to store buildings and alarm information, especially on larger deployments. So with the advent and the engagement of like this IoT technology, there's an option to digitalize a lift as an asset. So putting an IoT gateway in offers that. So it offers that ability to connect multiple other devices, and then add and extract more information from the lift itself. So yeah, lots of applications that we see are a standard upgrade from a already incumbent PSTN device that would be there, a legacy auto dialer that's converted across to cellular. But there's also this option to move to a digital telephony solution on the lift itself. So a digital auto dialer, a digital pit phone, and then the four-way comms can be all moved across to that. And the benefits of the digital technology will be things like heartbeats, diagnostics, really an improvement from like the visualization of exactly what's going on. There is visualization available with any P100 device. However, obviously it's much more advanced with a digital solution. Also with an IoT device, you can add downstream nodes. For example, if there's a CAN network, you could add monitoring, and then having an IoT platform enables cloud connectivity. So wherever there's multiple and large elevator estates, then to visualize that, keep audit trails for like 3-day background call checks, and have alarm notification when there is an issue, then that's really key as well. Having flexible power supplies on things like platform lift applications, there may not be a 220, 240 volt availability. So having a low voltage DC power supply as well can be very useful. And obviously making sure that the battery backup on the system, typically if you have like around 3 hours of power, then that always, when the battery loses some of its inherent charge over time, it'll still be well in advance of the EN81-28. Also, still not every manufacturer out there is truly open protocol. So the P100 was designed to be that open protocol for like the analog signaling, the DTMF, the 3-day background call checks, and that's something that's I think is key. That you could basically, when a multi-brand maintenance estate is being looked at, then it's flexibility in terms of being able to extract alarm information from like legacy equipment that's already installed. So having that ability gives that backwards compatibility and gives that standard set of alarm instructions and availability on notifications. Standards compliance, so obviously we talked about EN81-28, but there's also areas like EN81-70 for the inductive loop, where that can be, and that is embedded into the auto dialer and an alarm system. And also I think ability to store the compliance data for an audit trail, a long-term audit trail of that data, to make sure that those 72-hour 3-day background call checks have all been captured. There is additional connectivity on some GSM devices, for example, like onboard I/O. That onboard I/O could be used, for example, for applications like a lift out of service notification, fire alarm signal notification, that the system's gone into that mode. And also things like, say, for example, a pit alarm could be wired onto a onboard I/O. And then having a device built on like MQTT, which is the real now global standard for IoT devices. It gives that flexibility for future systems integration. If you wanted to take that alarm set data into a BMS system, into a SCADA system, for example, then MQTT enables that really easily to be shared. Then the security itself, what level of security is on the IoT device, and we'll talk more about that in further slides. There's also out there like some confusion really about VoIP phone systems in buildings. So these can be like IP PBX systems, and like a lot of building owners asking the question whether they could move an existing auto dialer across into a VoIP system. It throws out multiple challenges. One of the largest ones that we see is ATA configuration. ATA stands for the analog telephone adapter. So it's basically an analog to digital conversion device that enables basically legacy analog hardware to be moved across into a digital platform. The challenge with those types of devices is that they're not always easily configurable to all the DTMF tones that are available. There's 16 DTMF tones that can be used in auto dialers, and not all of them will pass easily. There's a standard, like for example, like on a keypad, the 1 to 9 plus the star and hash. There's also another 4 tones that aren't readily used, and often they get missed. So if this is being used, we do recommend that all the DTMF tones are tested through ATA devices. And the biggest challenge is like the network side of things. Basically, when you have a large network of downstream telephony, is how can the end user, how can the building owner ensure that EN81-28 battery backup time compliance could be applied throughout that whole network? And it's a real challenge to enable that. As a business, we've seen several examples of this recently, where actually when the clients have done due diligence on this, it turns out to be like 6 minutes of backup. So it's not the not enabled to provision a alarm call within the minimum required standard. And I think this is where it falls over. It can work in some instances, but in many others, getting that guarantee that all the devices that would be involved in the commissioning of the call have enough battery backup to enable the standards and regulatory compliance. So additional questions that would be good to add and ask for building IT managers and estate owners is every node on the VoIP system backed up? And if it is backed up, how long for? And then pulling back to the EN81 minimum standards of 1 hour plus 15 minutes of voice call capability. I think it's always a good benchmark here. In terms of security, many devices today out there will still use what's called secure socket layer technology, or SSL, to enable like the gateway communication. So some gateways don't even have this level of protection, and then this standard was superseded by something called TLS. So TLS is an upgraded high performance version of SSL, and basically it offers a more efficient authentication and also encrypted end-to-end channels on the communication. So it's much more kind of future-proof from that perspective, and then the guarantees of security are a lot higher. We're seeing more and more businesses ask for things like penetration testing on IoT devices, and with TLS it gives that real extra layer. With TLS itself, there's several versions available in the market. So 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. So it's good to just do a bit of background and due diligence in terms of what is available and what's embedded onto the device that are being used. Also, the security itself is what's called a multifaceted framework. So cloud systems, the gateways themselves, the auto dialers themselves all have their own separate security measures on. And then it's basically a framework of levels of protection. So there's not just one single point of failure or one single point of entry into that system. So it's good to think about that, making sure, for example, like downstream dialers have got passcode protection and it's changed on those devices, and really making sure that there's a strong approach, a layered approach to security overall. There's also physical security considerations, like, for example, things like SIM theft. So SIMs have been stolen from cellular devices and then used outside. So making sure that the SIM itself has got like a usage alarm on it. The SIM itself could be a password protected itself. So making sure that there's all these ways in place to alarm, diagnose and protect across the whole framework of the IoT device. So key questions here for consideration. Does the building owner themselves have any specific IoT requirements and standards that they're trying to adhere to? What framework governs the entire lift phone system? And what is the security level of the chosen GSM gateway that's going to be deployed? Now moving on to the area of network sunsetting. So this is basically the decommissioning of older cellular network infrastructure to make way for newer alternatives. So I don't know if anyone's seen the news at the moment, but like there's a lot of, even this week, publications from some of the big network providers, communication providers about the 3G sunset that's really accelerating throughout 2024. And the good news is that there's quite a lot of gateways out there on 3G, but they'll all fall back to 2G when the 3G disappears. So in terms of like the assets being affected, it won't affect any operation of those devices. The big one, when it does happen, would be the 2G phase out. This is expected to be announced within the next year or two, and there's a varying date ranges from different communication providers, from 2028 across to 2033. The whole of the UK's smart meter infrastructure is pretty much on 2G, and there's literally like probably getting on for over 1 million of those devices out there. So it's a huge undertaking. There's also things like car communication systems, water telemetry, traffic lights, all manner of infrastructure. So it's a huge undertaking. Actually, when the country comes down to do 2G, it's going to be a big thing, and it needs time to implement 4G and other technology. As we mentioned before, current tele alarms mainly rely on 2G for voice calls, but that 2G would move across to voice over LTE on the 4G channel when the 2G finally disappears. So making sure that the device fitted today has got the 4G LTE VoLTE support is key. On the infographic here, you can see different sunsets across the globe. So the ones in blue are completed, the ones in orange are planned, and then the ones in purple are in progress. So we'll see these like heat maps. You can get them online for 2G and from 3G, and it varies across different territories. And the bottom table is an overview of like what the dates some of the CPs, the communication provider, are putting out there around 2Gs and 3G shutdowns. The other technology that will come into the fore really is the voice over IP for a fully digital solution. It does need what's called a SIP server to initiate the other side of the call. So typically, like in a call center, they would have a SIP server for inbound voice over IP calls. And you can also see this technology playing out at like the mobile phone level. So for example, something like a WhatsApp call or a Microsoft Teams call would all be enabled on VoIP, but you'd need a VoIP app or a VoIP solution embedded onto the smartphone itself to receive a VoIP call. From a SIM perspective, the most reliable today would be a non-steered roaming option, so a SIM that would easily roam across different networks, and then basically pick up the best signal strength from those networks on offer. So that's the most widely used and deployed in the lift industry for this application. Our recommendations really is then for selection of gateway is opt at least for a 4G VoLTE enabled gateway, so something with voice over LTE on board. And then for longer asset life, then the considerations, if the assets are going to last 5 to 10 years, then consideration of voice over IP as a future-proof option. If calls across larger estates might move to this technology, then and we're seeing the shift happen quite more profoundly in France at the moment. They're really pushing that, and the Association de Ascenseur has really backed this as the technology. But as mentioned before, VoLTE seems to be the chosen path in the UK at the moment, but it's also good to have these options. In terms of the EN81-28 alarm, the critical occupant safety test here is the 72-hour test. Someone asked me recently, why is it 72 hours? And I asked a colleague, and it's because apparently that's the length of time that somebody can stay alive for in a lift if they get trapped. And 72 hours was the chosen amount to alarm out and check that the auto dialer could work. So typically in most auto dialers, you would have this as a standard setting. There are building owners who like a tighter time threshold on this test, and we see some national infrastructure companies doing this every 24 hours, for example. So this is something that can be changed within the auto dialer itself. The test itself would check the overall call via DTMF tones, and it also opens up the voice channel as well to enable and check that the voice channel itself is working. In parallel to this, most businesses rely on this 1-month physical alarm test during the routine maintenance visit. But I think it's important to, and we as a business feel it's important to have a backup and a good compliance trail of all the 72-hour tests and be able to keep that record of that, in addition to keeping a log of all the physical test alarms on a routine maintenance visit. The average lift maintenance estate today can range from 500 to 800 units. However, some lift maintainers have several thousand units under contract. So when these challenges are scaled up, then visualization, keeping good audit trails, having good alarms across a large estate of maintained elevators is really, really key, and problems can multiply if not done correctly. So a lot of IoT gateways offer this pathway for mass visualization via different cloud platforms in order to do this, to keep a log of the building, the elevator location, and then the phone infrastructure within it, and check the background calls are happening. And then utilization of P100 gives that multi-brand approach there, and the ability to source this data across different manufacturers into one cloud platform. The cloud platform that Avaya uses is shown here, and you get a status indication of the particular location, the particular lift itself, and then you can basically visualize the GSM gateway, downstream auto dialers, and things like even things like the 4-way comms, if they are the digital variants of that. And then different types of faults are available as signals. For example, things like poor signal strength, the backup power, battery status, all things like this that would affect the usability of the lift alarm. Even things like SIM, embedded SIMs, the time left on the SIMs, etc. So you can have a cloud platform that can do this and also do third-party equipment as well. So this type of platform enables quick identification of problems remotely to triage exactly what's going on, dynamic email alerts on device health, and then basically insights in terms of the portfolio. And some of these devices as well can offer further things like monitoring status of I/O, for example, of other types of notification around the lift. So in summary, the digital switch is really generating pace now. So this move to the end of 2025 is really moving quickly ahead. But there's a lot of red spots out there, and there's probably a lot of lift phones out there that are on fibre that don't have the relevant backup solution. So it's good to audit that. Deploying units en masse in terms of gateways can multiply future issues and also costs in terms of maintenance and future swap out. So making sure that those considerations are done at the time of install and planned across the asset life is really critical there. Important to consider the security, compliance, and then remote alarms as well within this implementation. And then thinking about things like voice carrier technology, sunsetting, and how alarm calls might be initiated in the future is another key area. So UK Switch is also a good opportunity for digitalization of lift assets at scale. So taking that PSTN architecture and updating it to digital, and then moving towards like this cloud-based visualization of EN81-28 compliance for alarm availability. So that concludes the presentation, and we'll move across to a Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, John. There's just been one question so far from Dean, and it was just around the battery backup for via gateway. Quite a specific one about our DCP. So I've responded to it, I've answered it, but essentially it was covered in elements in your presentation. So Dean just asked about how long does our backup battery last, and it's every 3 years we recommend for it to be replaced. But you can also, like you mentioned, John, you can monitor it on our Avaya hub. You can set up email notifications so that as soon as the battery level goes below a certain point, you can have emails, so you don't have to constantly be checking on it in the hub. I don't believe there's functionality yet for text alerts, but that is something we are looking at for future development. It's available as a one-off purchase from Avaya if you need to replace the batteries. I've included the code as well in the comments. So yeah, I think that's answered Dean's question. There's no other questions at the moment.
Yeah, if anyone's you could unmute yourself and feel free to ask any live questions as well. If there's none, oh yeah. So yeah, I've got a question here from someone asking basically very good question, yeah, and a complex one, which is what's the best for poor signal areas. So there's various means, I guess. One thing we'd recommend is like checking for signal. So the devices themselves. So the GSM device has got a signal strength indicator on board. That can be plugged into a laptop. You can measure it, and so it's got LEDs on the device itself to measure signal strength. And then Avaya offer a suite of different high gain antennas that can be mounted in different locations and run up to 15 meters away from the device. So we did an installation this week actually in London where it's like actually went onto the roof of the building and used a high gain antenna, and then that coupled with a roaming SIM card enable them to get signal. Another option is for the building itself, if it's a greenfield development, to have like a signal strength booster that will be like a building-wide signal strength booster. So if that is used, then the key thing there is to make sure that that's backed up. So that's the challenge that we have on those. There's varying ones out there, but not all are backed up. So it's really important to consider that if you're connecting it to something that is critical to provide the signal. Hopefully that answers that question.
I've had a question from Dave. Are the supplied SIM cards fully roaming across all networks? Yes, they are. I think the key element here is that they are non-steered, and that's a key thing to ask when you're purchasing a SIM card for your lift emergency system. You don't want it tied to any parent network, because it could still be roaming, but what it would mean is it would always try and latch onto that parent of a steered network, whereas ours isn't. It will roam to the strongest signal and it'll roam across all the network. It's not tied to any particular network. So I think that's the key element to that, Dave. But thanks for your question. Hopefully that's answered the question.
Yeah, and then another question from Tim. So what are the options when there's no signal available? Is there anything that can be done? Yes, a very good question. I was chatting to a large national infrastructure company this week, actually, and they had an application where they had no signal whatsoever, and they went down the road of a satellite system, but it's very expensive. So that's one option, but I think they had a fairly sizable budget to enable that. So landlines can still be used, with obviously, as we talked about, making sure that that the system is backed up effectively. We do have certain clients where they don't allow the use of GSMs, but in that instance, we would work with them and obviously recommending that the systems that back up are all compliant for the 1 hour and then 15 minutes worth of voice, so that can deliver that. And if it's a UPS that powers a site, how can they measure the effectiveness of that UPS system? Okay. So if there's no other questions, I'd just really like to, thank you for taking time out to listen to the webinar. Really appreciated. And we will pop the recording, and also we'll pop some of the Q&A answers onto our website. So thank you, and have a good rest of your day. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.